This story is titled My Family Abandoned Me. Years ago, when my ex falsely accused me of rape. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's engagement is declining, and subscribing is one of the most effective ways you can show your support. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you great content. Your support means everything to us, so let's work together to keep this channel growing. Thanks so much. Now let's jump into the video. Honestly, I'm not sure where to begin. I've been lurking for years, but never imagined I'd be sharing something like this. Apologies if this gets all over the place. I haven't slept in about 36 hours. So here's the background. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I was in a relationship with a 25-year-old woman for about 3 years. We met in college and moved in together after graduation. I thought everything was solid. She's smart, attractive, and has a marketing job at a prestigious firm. I worked at a healthcare company, earning decent money. Not extraordinary, but enough. I worked full-time while finishing my computer science degree online. I only had 2 semesters left after 5 years of night classes. I was balancing both my job and school, slowly paying off my student debt while gaining work experience. For most of our relationship, things were great. I'm not going to pretend I was the perfect boyfriend, but I really did try. I was the one who always remembered our anniversaries, surprised her with weekend getaways, and stayed up late helping her prepare for presentations. When her mom got sick last year, I drove her 3 hours each way every weekend for 2 months so she could visit. When she decided to try CrossFit, I even paid for a 6-month membership as her birthday gift, even though it meant eating ramen to make rent. I sat through every single episode of The Bachelor with her, and trust me, that's true love right there. I thought we were on the same page about everything. Maybe marriage one day, kids a few years later, saving for a house. We talked about our future all the time. I was even about to spend 3 months' salary on an engagement ring. I had already picked it out, and I planned to propose during our trip to Cancun next month. The tickets were non-refundable, so that was another $1,200 gone. Everyone, including her sister, who I had planned the proposal with, thought we were rock solid. I even started calling her parents Mom and Dad because they said I was already part of the family. But I guess not. Then, last week, I noticed she had been acting strange, always on her phone, staying late at work, typical red flags. I'm not proud of this, but when she was in the shower, I checked her phone. I found hundreds of texts between her and this CrossFit instructor she'd been seeing. Not just casual texts, but full-on sexting, with plans to meet up while I was at work. It turned out they had been sleeping together for months in our apartment, in our bed, while I was working overtime to save for the ring. FML. When I confronted her, I was expecting the usual tears and apologies, maybe something thrown at my head. But what I didn't expect was a complete meltdown. I waited until she came back from a girls' night out, still giggling. Her lipstick was a shade I'd never seen before, and her makeup was a bit too perfect for a casual night out. "Had fun?" I asked, leaning against the counter. She smiled brightly. "Yeah, Melissa was so drunk it was hilarious." Melissa, the same pregnant friend who I thought wasn't supposed to be taking tequila shots. I kept my voice calm. "Huh, that's so?" She kicked off her heels, still oblivious. "Yeah, she was a mess." I watched her carefully. "So, anything you want to tell me?" She paused, fiddling with her purse. "What are you talking about?" The smile stayed, but there was hesitation now, a flicker of fear, maybe. I tilted my head. "I don't know. Maybe something about CrossFit Mike, or should I call him Daddy like you do in your texts?" And just like that, the mask cracked. Her expression went from confused to furious in an instant. "You went through my phone? What the? That's private." I let out a dry laugh. "Privacy?" "Yeah, super important when you're screwing some guy in our bed." She opened her mouth, scrambling for words. It wasn't like that. We just what?" I interrupted. "Accidentally fell on him multiple times for 3 months?" Her face twisted in anger, and suddenly I was the one who was the problem. "This is exactly your issue. You're so controlling, always questioning me, always checking up on me. I scoffed. Oh, that's rich. I checked your phone once because you've been acting shady as hell. Don't even try to turn this on me. She crossed her arms, her voice shaking but still defiant. You always do this, make me the bad guy. You've never trusted me. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots. Trust? Yeah, let's talk about that. I read aloud. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Last night was amazing. My boyfriend's working late again. Come over. And that's when things got weird. Instead of taking responsibility, I watched her transform right before my eyes. Her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal, then something changed in her expression. I'll never forget it. It was as if she had made some terrible calculation in her head. Don't touch me, she whispered. What? I asked. I'm not even near you. Don't touch me, she screamed, backing against the wall, and like every other time, I felt a chill run through my body. What are you talking about? Her voice got quiet, almost mechanical. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The nights I said no and you didn't listen. The times you got aggressive when I wouldn't. Her voice cracked, and actual tears began to fall. This wasn't just lying. It was acting. Broadway-level performance. You're insane, I said, my voice shaking. You're making this up because I caught you. You forced yourself on me, she screamed so loudly that the neighbors must have heard. Multiple times, and I have the texts to prove it. My stomach dropped. What texts? I asked. You've been gaslighting me for years, she continued, her confidence growing with every word, making me feel like I was the crazy one for feeling violated. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what was happening. This woman I had loved for 3 years was creating the worst possible story about me, and she was convincing herself it was true. Later, I'd learn the full truth. She had more to lose than I realized. Her ultra-religious parents would have disowned her for cheating. She was up for a partnership track at her accounting firm, where she had cultivated this perfect good girl image. And the guy she was sleeping with? Her boss's nephew. So instead of admitting to being a cheater, she decided to destroy my life instead. Classic. The next morning at 6:03 a.m., the cops showed up at my apartment. I know because I was staring at my alarm clock when I heard the pounding on the door. I'd been awake all night, sick with anxiety. The police shouted, "Open up!" I stumbled to the door, still in my boxers and a ratty t-shirt, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment I unlocked the door, it swung open violently, nearly breaking my nose. 3 officers rushed in, weapons drawn. "Get on the ground, now!" they ordered. I dropped to the floor immediately. A knee slammed into my back, forcing the air out of my lungs. Cold metal handcuffs bit into my wrists, so tight they cut off circulation. They dragged me into the hallway like that, disoriented, bleeding from my nose. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, stood in her doorway in a bathrobe, hand over her mouth. The look in her eyes was pure disgust, as if I were some kind of disease. "Please," I gasped, "this is a mistake." The taller officer accidentally slammed my head into the door frame of the squad car. "Whoops," he said flatly, then leaned in close to my ear. "We got another one, boys. These college punks think they can get away with anything." As the car pulled away, I caught a glimpse of my building through swollen eyes. People were coming out onto their balconies, pointing. Someone was filming with their phone. It was my last moment as the person I used to be. Everything after that would be defined by this accusation. 26 years of building an identity, a reputation, friendships, a future, all erased in a single morning. I spent 3 days in a holding cell before they even let me call anyone. The other guys in there found out what I was accused of, thanks to a loudmouth cop. That was fun. Nothing like getting beaten up while everyone looks the other way. I called my parents, certain they would help. My dad always preached about family being above all else and how blood is thicker than water. What a crock of crap that turned out to be. "Dad, you have to help me. She's lying. I swear to God," I begged. "Don't you dare take the Lord's name after what you've done," he interrupted. "Your mother is in tears. 25 years we raised you, and this is how you repay us. But Dad, I didn't. Save it for the judge. Don't call this number again. You're not my son, he snapped, then hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone. Did my own father just hang up on me? The same guy who bailed my sister out after her third DUI, the same parents who forgave my brother for stealing from Grandma's retirement fund. But me? Guilty until proven innocent. No, scratch that. Guilty even after proven innocent. It didn't matter that I had no record, that I had never been in trouble a day in my life. All it took was one lie from her, and suddenly I was public enemy number one. The cops did their job. They interviewed her friends, combed through her phone, searched for anything that could back up her claims. You know what they found? Nothing. Because there was nothing to find. One of the detectives even pulled me aside in private, his voice low, almost apologetic. Between you and me, I believe she's lying, but we had to follow the rules. They knew I was innocent, yet I still ended up in a cell for 7 days. During that time, my reputation was dragged through the dirt. 7 days of cold concrete, awful food, and guards who treated me like a monster. 7 days of uncertainty, wondering if my life was ruined because of her. Then, just like that, I was released with no charges and no trial. It was just a half-hearted, "You're free to go." I thought that was the end, that I could return to my life and maybe salvage what was left. But I was wrong. When I stepped outside, the real nightmare started. As soon as I got out, I discovered that all of our mutual friends had blocked me. My social media accounts exploded with death threats from strangers. Someone leaked my work address online, and I was fired the same day. HR called it a liability issue. 3 years at that company, employee of the month twice, and they couldn't even look me in the eye when they handed me my final paycheck. I returned to my apartment to find the locks changed, and a note from the landlord saying he didn't rent to people like me. My belongings were dumped in garbage bags by the dumpster, with half of it already gone. I called my best friend, the one who was supposed to be my ride or die, and he went straight to voicemail. I sent him a text. "Me, Jake, you know me. Please tell me you don't believe this." The typing bubble appeared, and then disappeared, only to appear again. I held my breath. Jake replied, "Look, man, I don't know what to think, but I can't be associated with this. I have a wife and daughter to protect." No more responses, just blocked. 3 years of friendship erased. I reached out to a former coworker, someone I considered a friend. As soon as she answered, she sighed. "You need to stop contacting people. No one wants to be part of this," she said before hanging up. I texted my cousin who lived nearby, but the message was read, and there was no response. It felt like I had contracted social leprosy. Nobody wanted to be near me. The accusations spread throughout our town like wildfire, each retelling becoming more graphic and horrific. My university sent a cheerful email. "Dear student, due to recent allegations, you are prohibited from campus until further notice. Please refrain from entering university grounds or attending in-person classes. Assignments can be submitted electronically. Failure to comply may result in law enforcement involvement. Have a nice day. Office of Student Affairs." Even the grocery store clerk, who used to flirt with me, flinched when I walked in. The barista at my regular coffee shop spilled my drink 3 times before I understood the message. My dentist mysteriously had no openings for 6 months. I was dead to everyone, but no one had the decency to actually kill me. The only person who didn't completely abandon me was my freshman year roommate. Let's just call him the only decent person in that town. "You can crash on my couch for a week," he said, "but my parents can't find out." That week turned into 2, and I burned through the little savings I had, applying for jobs that nobody would offer me. My roommate would bring home leftovers from his restaurant job, sneaking them in like contraband. "Dude, you need to leave town," he finally said one night. "People aren't going to forget. They don't care about the truth." He was right. Even though I had technically been cleared, everyone treated me like I had gotten away with murder. I overheard some guys at the gas station. "Yeah, that's him, the rapist who got off on a technicality." I got home to find my car keyed with the words "or us" across the hood. Subtle. The next day, My roommate drove me to a bus station 2 towns over and slipped me $600, his entire paycheck. "Don't tell me where you're going," he said. "Seriously, don't contact me. They're watching your socials. Just disappear." We did this awkward half hug, and he was gone. I stood there with a duffel bag containing everything I owned, which wasn't much. I bought a ticket to the farthest city the bus would take me. I ended up in a rundown industrial town, working the night shift at a meat processing plant. One of those jobs where they don't ask questions as long as you can lift 50 pounds repeatedly without passing out. My apartment had more roaches than square footage. I slept on an air mattress that deflated every night, waking up essentially on concrete. I showered using a garden hose rigged to the bathroom sink because the actual shower was full of black mold. I told myself I could handle it. The poverty, the terrible job, the isolation. It all sucked, but I could survive. I could claw my way back up. But I had no idea how much of my identity had been tied to others until every connection was severed. I developed constant anxiety whenever I had to interact with strangers. Would they recognize me? Had they seen those social media posts? The character assassination had been so complete that I started wondering if maybe I was the monster they all claimed. Maybe I had blacked out and done something horrible that I couldn't remember. The gaslighting had worked its way into my brain, and I began doubting my own memories. I lost 30 pounds in the first month. I couldn't sleep for more than an hour without waking up from nightmares. I even started pulling out my own hair when I was stressed, creating a bald spot I had to hide. I tried therapy once, but when the therapist Googled me during the session, I saw her do it. Her entire attitude changed, and she referred me to someone else who, for some reason, never had any openings. Even strangers could sense something was wrong with me. I developed this hunched posture, avoided eye contact, and flinched at sudden movements. I looked guilty even though I wasn't, all because of a crime I didn't commit. The hardest part wasn't the poverty, the job, or even the isolation. It was not being able to be myself anymore. So I changed everything. My hair, my clothes, even the way I walked. I grew a beard and started telling people my name was something else entirely. Every morning I practiced introducing myself with my new name in the mirror, trying to make it sound natural. "Hi, I'm not the name my parents gave me. I'm not the person I used to be." I became paranoid about social media, deleted every account, changed my email and phone number, and lived like a fugitive even though I hadn't done anything wrong. The nightmares were the worst. I'd dream I was back in that cell, but this time they were convicting me. Or I'd dream I was at a party and everyone was whispering and pointing. Sometimes I dreamt my ex was there, laughing. One night, I reached rock bottom. I stood on the roof of my building for an hour, just staring down at the pavement. What stopped me wasn't some realization about life being precious. It was spite. Pure burning spite. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let my parents be right about me being worthless. The next day, I applied to a culinary program in another state. Why cooking? Because it was the opposite of my old life plan. Because nobody from my past would think to look for me in a kitchen. Because I needed to create something instead of just surviving. It meant more student loans on top of the ones I couldn't already pay. It meant working 2 jobs, prep cook by day, dishwasher by night, while taking classes. I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night, surviving on energy drinks and sheer stubbornness. But for the first time in months, I had a purpose beyond just existing. Culinary school was brutal. 12-hour days on my feet, instructors who made Gordon Ramsay look easy, and classmates half my age who had never experienced anything worse than having their parents take away their BMW. But I loved it. When you're focused on not cutting your finger off while chopping onions at high speed, there's no time for self-pity. I kept to myself. No dating, no parties, minimal small talk. Just work, study, sleep, repeat. My apartment was slightly better than the roach-infested place, but it still had silverfish and the occasional mouse. After graduation, I got a job at an upscale restaurant. Nothing fancy, just prep work and occasionally handling the grill when the main chef needed a smoke break. But it was a foot in the door. The head chef noticed I was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. You cooking to live or living to cook? He asked one night. Huh, cooking to live, I replied honestly. He nodded. Good. The ones who say they live to cook are usually the first to burn out. You got something to prove? Something like that. Well, prove it by making this hollandaise sauce not taste like yellow snot. A few months later, he promoted me to sous chef. The pay raise meant I could move into an apartment where the bathroom didn't double as the kitchen. I started sleeping better and cut back on the drinking. That's when I saw the ad. A prestigious hotel chain was looking for chefs for their international locations. Room and board included. A fresh start in a new country. I applied without expecting much. My resume was decent, but nothing special. But they needed someone who could relocate to Southeast Asia immediately. And apparently, nobody else wanted to drop everything and move across the world on 2 weeks' notice, except me. I had nothing to drop and nowhere that felt like home. 2 days later, I had a video interview. They seemed desperate. Tourism was booming post-COVID, and they couldn't staff up fast enough. My culinary school credentials looked better on paper than they really were, but I faked it till I made it. A week later, I was on a plane with everything I owned, stuffed into 2 checked bags. 16 hours of flying later, I stepped off the plane into humidity so thick it felt like breathing soup. A guy held a sign with my name on it, spelled wrong, and drove me 2 hours to the resort in a van with no AC. I was so jet-lagged, I barely registered anything until I woke up the next morning, pulled back the curtains, and was stunned. The international resort felt like working on another planet. Palatial buildings, pristine beaches, guests spending more on a single meal than I made in a month. My living quarters were nicer than anywhere I'd lived before. The staff was mostly locals with a few internationals like me. We lived, ate, and worked together, a mismatched family of misfits. I tried to keep my guard up, but it's hard to stay distant when 15 people are teaching you their language and sneaking you their grandma's recipes. There was this one server from the hotel restaurant. She'd bring me strange local fruits during breaks and laugh at my reactions. She started teaching me phrases in her language, most of which I later found out were a bit inappropriate. She was patient in a way I didn't deserve. I was still jumpy, still flinched if someone moved too suddenly, still suspicious of kindness. The first time she casually touched my arm during a conversation, I recoiled like I'd been burned. "You've been hurt before," she said simply, not as a question. I nodded. "Me too," she replied, then changed the subject. That was it. No pushing for details, no amateur psychoanalysis, just acknowledgement. We started hanging out after shifts, walking on the beach, talking about nothing important. She told me about growing up in her village, and I told her about my culinary school disasters, giving her carefully edited versions of my life. The first time she invited me to her family's home for dinner, I panicked and made up an excuse. The second time, I reluctantly agreed. Her father grilled me like I was applying to marry his daughter, which, to be fair, was where things were heading, though I didn't know it yet. It was the first time in years I'd been in a family home, and it hurt in a way I wasn't ready for. I hadn't anticipated being reminded of what I had lost, but it was strangely healing to see that families could actually offer support, that parents could love unconditionally. Slowly, very slowly, I began to lower my defenses and started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserved something good. After 2 years of dating, we married in a ceremony that merged her traditions with American ones. Her family made a big effort, while my side of the aisle was nearly empty, with only a few co-workers and my old roommate, who I had finally reconnected with. He had flown 20 hours to be there. He was the only connection to my past that didn't feel toxic. "You look happy, man," he said during the reception. Like actually happy, not just pretending. I realized he was right. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped just surviving and started truly living again. A year after we got married, my wife became pregnant with twins, because apparently, I can't do anything halfway. When the doctor told us, I nearly passed out. Twins meant double everything, including double the anxiety. At that moment, all my fears as a father flooded back. What if they discovered my past? What if my parents found out about them? But when I first held my son and daughter, these tiny, perfect beings who somehow didn't hate me, something clicked. I made a silent promise that they would never experience abandonment, and they would never doubt that they were loved. We bought a house in a nice neighborhood. I got promoted to executive chef, and my wife started her own business importing specialty foods. The twins grew into amazing little people with her smile and my stubbornness. Life was good, genuinely good. It wasn't perfect, of course, with normal issues like bills, teething babies, and work stress, but they were just normal problems, not the soul-crushing weight I had carried for so long. Then, one night, I opened the front door and found my father standing there after 8 years of silence, 8 years of becoming someone new. He looked older, with gray hair, wrinkles, and the slight stoop of someone carrying invisible burdens. He tried to smile and started speaking, but I slammed the door so hard the hinges rattled. My son began crying, confused by my reaction, so I took him to his room, hands trembling as I tried to comfort him. I called my wife to bring our daughter inside from the garden. My father kept knocking. I broke down, sobbing in a way I hadn't since those first terrible days after the accusation. My wife held me, then went to answer the door herself. I could hear her in the other room. Not the words, but the fierce protective tone she used as my defender when I couldn't defend myself. Eventually, I told her to let him in. I needed to face this demon once and for all. He sat awkwardly on the couch, looking at the family photos on the wall, while I remained standing, arms crossed. "How did you find me?" I asked flatly. He sighed. "It's complicated. I hired a private investigator after I found out the truth." "What truth?" I asked. "About 6 months ago, your ex's phone broke, screen shattered completely. She brought it to the store where I work part-time since retiring, asking if we could recover the data before replacing it." I raised an eyebrow. "You still work at that cell phone repair shop?" He nodded. "Just weekends. Anyway, I recognized her name on the work order. I shouldn't have, but I accessed her texts while transferring her data." "That's a federal crime, isn't it?" I asked. "Probably," he admitted. "But I saw a conversation with some guy named Mike. They were arguing about guilt. Show me," I demanded. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos, and handed it to me. It was screenshots of their text exchange. "Mike, I can't keep doing this. Every time I see your post about being a survivor, I feel sick." Her. "What do you want me to do? Admit I made it all up and destroy my life?" Mike. "You destroyed his life. He didn't do anything to you." Her. "It was years ago. He's probably fine." Mike. "His family disowned him. He lost everything." Her. "That's not my fault." Mike. "It is literally your fault." I scrolled through more screenshots, dozens of messages where she admitted to lying, while Mike, presumably the guy she cheated with, struggled with guilt. "Why did you wait?" I asked. "These are from almost a year ago." "I confronted her," he said, voice cracking. "She denied it at first, then broke down and admitted everything. She said she panicked when you caught her cheating, and it spiraled." "And it took you 8 years to find me?" I asked. "It wasn't easy. You changed your name, moved overseas. The PI cost me most of my retirement savings, and even then, he only narrowed it down to this region. I've been going from hotel to hotel for weeks." "How did you find this address?" I asked. He looked down sheepishly. "Facebook. Your old roommate posted about visiting you last year and tagged the resort. Not your exact location, but enough to start asking around. The pieces fit." But I wasn't ready to believe him yet. "What happened to her after you confronted her?" "I told your mother. She contacted the police with the evidence, but they said it was too late to press charges. Your ex's parents found out, though, and cut her off completely." I felt nothing at this news. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness. "Why now?" I asked. "After all this time?" His eyes welled up. "Because I was wrong. Because I failed you when you needed me most. Because I want to see my son before I die." I said nothing. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he said. "But she misses you. We both do. 8 years. 8 years of silence, when I needed them most. 8 years to find the truth. 8 years too late." As I sat there, Looking at this pathetic old man, I realized something important. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love, or their acceptance, or their forgiveness. I had built something beautiful from the ashes they left me in. I had a real family now, one based on choice, love, and standing together when things got hard. "You need to leave," I told him, "and don't come back." He started to protest, but something in my eyes must have stopped him. He stood up, defeated. "Can I at least see my grandchildren before I go?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "They're not your grandchildren. You don't get to abandon your child and then claim his children. That's not how this works." As he walked to the door, I felt a weight lifting. The ghost of my old life finally exorcised. My wife came downstairs after putting the twins to bed. "Are you okay?" she asked. I pulled her close. "Yeah, I think I finally am." All I could think about was what my father told me before he left. He told me about what happened to my ex after her lies fell apart. Apparently, when he confronted her with the evidence, she panicked and confessed everything to mutual friends. News spread quickly. The accounting firm fired her for ethical concerns after clients started asking questions. Her boss's nephew's wife divorced him and took him for everything. My ex's perfect reputation imploded. It turns out she had been manipulating people for years, and once one lie cracked, the whole facade shattered. Last my father heard, her religious parents flipped out when they found out about the cheating and kicked her out of the house. Her social media went silent after former friends started publicly calling her out. Karma's a bitch, I guess. But honestly, I felt nothing hearing this. No satisfaction, no vindication. She just didn't matter to me anymore. She's homeless now. She couch surfs with increasingly distant acquaintances until everyone gets tired of her. Apparently, she was spotted at the bus station with a cardboard sign looking strung out. Part of me wondered if she ever thought about the symmetry, how she had made me homeless years ago, and now she was experiencing the same fate. But even that felt hollow. Her suffering didn't undo mine. It didn't give me back those lost years. Some people say forgiveness sets you free. Maybe that's true for some. But for me, freedom came from building something so good that the past became irrelevant. From creating the family I deserved instead of chasing the one that threw me away. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And I chose to become a man my children will never have reason to doubt. Weird update on the friend situation. So, this is kind of funny sad. As soon as word got out that I was doing well, my inbox started filling up. My old roommate's FB post apparently opened the floodgates. I got messages from people who ghosted me 8 years ago, now claiming they never fully believed it or always had their doubts. One dude, Jake, my former best friend, had the audacity to message me. "Hey man, heard what really happened? That's messed up. We should grab a beer sometime." Like seriously? You thought I was a rapist for 8 years, but now want to grab a beer? LMAO. I ignored most of them, but met up with exactly 2 people who seemed genuinely sorry. It was weird seeing them. It felt like running into NPCs from a game I stopped playing years ago. They kept staring at me like I was some kind of success story, asking about my journey like I'm some motivational speaker. I don't need their validation, but not gonna lie. There was something strangely satisfying about them seeing I thrived without them. Not in a revenge way, more like confirmation that I made the right call by moving forward instead of getting stuck in the past.